All right, let's put everything that we've talked about together. I have a little assignment here, and it's to take this code right here and make it testable. It's already a little bit of the way there. You can see it's already kind of broken down into little units right here. Let's just quickly talk about what it's supposed to do here. So we're fetching, so we've got this main function here, right? And it's being called and given process.arg index number 3, which will be the command line argument fed to it. Okay, so that's coming in here as a client ID. And we're then using that client ID to fetch some data right here. Okay, when that data comes in, we're doing some normalization to it. Right here, you can see here's the normalization function right here. The data that's coming in looks like this. It's got a name and an age. We're just splitting the name at a space so we can get first name and last name because we want an object that looks like this. And then finally, we're storing that normalized data. I have kind of a fake, well, it's not kind of, it is very much a fake storage service right here called Acme Data Storage. I misspelled it there. So even my fake non-working function will not work because it's misspelled. Okay. Anyway, so Acme Data Storage, it will store data. You just need to give it an API key and the data that you want stored. And then finally, when that promise returns, then we will console log out some information. Okay, so everything that we've been looking at is in this testable code repo right here. So if you want to look at any of the quote slides, unquote, you can look at them. They start right here in README, and then you can just click next to go through them. But also in testable code, there is a source folder where I've created a solution to that assignment. So I want to just show you a little bit about this. And I'm just going to bring it over in my IDE because that's a little easier for me than navigating around in GitHub. Okay, so here's that source folder. And we won't go through all of this, but I just want to show you a little bit of it. So I've started with some facades right here for those third-party code libraries that have side effects. So I've created a facade called getData, and what getData would do in a real application is it would import fetch or Axios or some other library like that. Just to make everything self-contained right here, I've created a dummy fetch that just always returns the same thing. But we'll just ignore that and pretend that it's an actual import. And then I'm wrapping that import here. I want users meaning me, when I'm writing the rest of my code, to access this fetch with this interface called getData. Now later on I could put Axios or something completely different inside here instead of fetch, but that's not going to make any difference to the rest of my code. It will access it through getData instead. Okay, and I've got another one for store data, and I've even got one for console log right here. This way, in my tests, if I want to, I can have some sort of double for logging when I test that. Now, if you're a TypeScript coder, you'll know about interfaces. I've got all these different interfaces. I just want you to see that getData follows this interface right here. Right? So, right there. So, when I use this, I'm just going to need to use something that implements this interface. And the other main thing I want to show you are these modules. Really, right now, they're all in utils, but however you want to organize things. So let's look at get client data. These are all pretty much the same. So get client data has a factory function. Now, you saw me go through this pattern earlier. The factory needs as an input what I'm calling a getter. And that getter can be anything, but it must conform to this interface that I showed you a minute ago. So it must have a shape that looks like this. Function that takes in a URL. This should be typed to string, forgot to do that, and returns a promise. Okay. So it takes in a getter and it returns a function that uses that getter to get client data this way. Okay, so this is my factory. Again, it's a function that returns another function, and that the return function uses a injected dependency, in this case, some kind of getter. Now, in my production code, I actually use the factory to create a function that I'm calling get client data, and I'm handing it the actual implementation, the actual get data from the facades. So this will really be able to actually get real data from an endpoint. In my test, however, I'm creating my own getter right here, and when I call the factory, I'm handing it that getter instead, so that I just have confidence about what will be returned. Now, again, if you're thinking, yes, but how do I know that this will, what I get back from the endpoint will actually be something like this? Okay, what if they change, this to full name or something like that? Well, in a unit test, that's not really my concern. Okay, that's more of an integration test concern. Remember, all I'm doing is I'm testing this function right here. Its concern is not what actually happens inside this getter. Okay, so it's just going to assume the getter works, and I just need to test, that it takes in a client ID and returns what I expect to be returned. You can see I'm doing the same kind of thing down here with store client data. It's got a factory. It's got an actual implementation that's being given something real to work with, and then in my test, it's being given kind of a fake store data to work with. Okay. The other thing that I want you to see is that there are certain things I am not testing. Okay, I am not testing these index files, and I've written a note up here that says no test because this has got injected dependencies. I don't want to test this version, I want to test the factory version instead. The other things I'm not testing are my facades. Okay, I'm not testing this, it's just a wrapped third-party code. To really test this, I'd have to test the actual fetch that I'm importing, and I don't want to test that in a unit test. I still have 100% coverage when I run this because I'm testing the factory. I'm testing the factories right here, and the factories are fully tested, assuming they get, some kind of getter, which I'm actually creating in the unit tests themselves. The one little module here that does not follow the pattern of having a factory is this normalize client data. And that is because it doesn't have any dependencies. It doesn't need to be injected, so I can just test this function directly. Now, if I wanted to, I could follow this pattern in all of my modules. I could follow it here. I could have a factory right here that doesn't take in any dependencies and just always returns this function right here. It seems a little silly to have that extra level of wrapping, but you could if you just wanted kind of a real, sort of regular pattern that you always follow. So that's it. I have done the best I can to make this testable. Let's see how my tests run here. test. And as you see, all my tests pass, and I have 100% coverage. So, yay!